It was one of those summer nights where the air feels heavy, as if the heat has soaked into the pavement and refuses to leave. The time was close to 2:30 in the morning, and the city streets were nearly empty. Most of the neighborhood was asleep. Houses dark, windows closed, the faint hum of air conditioners buzzing behind the silence. A college student, tired but restless, had just left a friend's apartment after a long evening of studying and talking. She chose to walk home instead of calling a cab. It wasn't a long walk, maybe 20 minutes, and she had walked the same path many times before. Her phone was in her hand, earphones tucked in, music playing softly. Just enough to drown out the night, but not loud enough to block the world completely. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The click of her shoes on the sidewalk, the distant rumble of a car several blocks away, the faint rustle of trees shifting in the warm night breeze. She passed familiar houses, their lawns glowing faintly in the dim yellow light from the street lamps. The heat pressed down, sticky and uncomfortable, but the silence felt comforting. Then she heard it. Footsteps. At first, she thought it was an echo of her own. She slowed her pace slightly, and so did the sound. She quickened her steps, and the footsteps behind her matched, steady and deliberate. The hair on the back of her neck rose. She glanced over her shoulder, expecting to see another late-night walker, or maybe someone walking their dog. But there was no one. The street stretched out behind her, empty and still. Yet she knew, absolutely knew, she had heard something. Her chest tightened. She pulled her phone up, pretending to text, and kept walking faster. The music in her ears suddenly felt too loud, like it was covering something she needed to hear. She slipped one earbud out, and there it was again. The sound of shoes against concrete. A rhythm just slightly out of sync with her own, like someone deliberately pacing her. Her pulse quickened. She told herself not to panic. Maybe it was just another person on the street, someone keeping their distance. Cities weren't empty at night. People had late shifts, night walks, reasons to be out. She told herself this, but her gut twisted with unease. When she turned the next corner, she caught it. A shadow under the nearest street lamp. A tall figure, motionless, standing in the weak orange glow. The figure didn't move forward, didn't wave or greet her. Just stood there, still watching. She froze mid-step, heart pounding in her ears. For a moment she considered turning back, but when she blinked, the figure was gone. The street was empty again. Her breath shook. Maybe it had been a trick of the light, she told herself. The lamp flickered slightly, casting strange shapes. Maybe it was her imagination fueled by exhaustion. She tried to laugh it off, though the sound caught in her throat. She kept walking, faster now, trying to appear calm. She pulled her phone to her ear, pretending to call someone. No service. Her screen lit up the words in mocking white. No signal. She tapped the screen, moved the phone around, desperate for even a single bar. Nothing. That was when she felt it. Not heard this time. Felt. The sensation of someone passing close to her shoulder. The displacement of air. The faint brush of movement just inches away. She spun around, but there was nothing there. The sidewalk stretched behind her in silence, empty and endless. Her breathing grew ragged. She clutched her bag tighter and broke into a jog, shoes slapping the pavement in sharp, frantic rhythm. Every few steps she glanced back, but the street remained deserted. No shadows, no figures, nothing except the pounding in her ears and the unshakable certainty that she wasn't alone. Finally, her apartment building came into view. A squat, brick complex with a single light above the main entrance. Relief surged through her chest as she sprinted across the last block, fumbling for her keys. She shoved the door open, slammed it shut behind her, and snapped the deadbolt into place. Silence. Her tiny apartment was still safe, familiar. The hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. She pressed her back to the door, trying to calm her shaking breaths. She was home. Nothing could follow her here. Or so she thought. She locked the chain above the door and turned away, finally letting herself breathe. Her heart slowed. The apartment felt ordinary again. She almost laughed at how terrified she'd been. Shadows and footsteps, probably just her mind playing tricks. Then she heard it. A faint sound. Metal on metal. She turned slowly, eyes widening. The chain she had just locked was rattling. The doorknob trembled as if someone on the other side was testing it, twisting it gently, carefully, as though they were making sure she wouldn't notice. Her body froze. The sound went on for several seconds. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. She stood there, trembling, unable to move. And then, clear as a whisper in her ear, she heard the words, soft, raspy, unmistakably close. "I'm right behind you." The light in the apartment flickered once. Then darkness. Summer nights in the woods carry their own kind of silence. It's not the same as the silence of the city, where the hum of electricity and the distant rush of traffic fill the gaps. Out here, the silence feels deeper, thicker, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the chirping of crickets that vanish all at once when something larger moves nearby. For friends had decided to go camping that weekend. They weren't experienced campers, not really. The trip was more about escaping the heat of the city, having a few drinks, and telling stories under the stars than it was about roughing it in the wild. They set up a small fire in a clearing not far from their tents, roasting marshmallows and laughing too loudly, their voices carrying into the trees. The fire crackled and popped, sparks swirling up into the dark sky. They traded scary stories, each trying to outdo the other. A girl told one about a faceless hitchhiker on a deserted road. One of the guys followed up with a story about a woman in white seen near a riverbank, always beckoning travelers closer. They laughed nervously, mocking each other's delivery, but each of them kept sneaking glances at the shadows just beyond the firelight. It was some time after midnight when he appeared. The figure stepped into the circle of light like he had always been there, though none of them had noticed him approach. A tall man, dressed in dark clothes that looked a little too heavy for the summer heat. His hair hung low, shadowing his face, but he smiled, or at least it looked like a smile, as he greeted them. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice low, gravelly. The friends looked at each other, startled. They hadn't heard footsteps. No twig snapping, no brush rustling. It was as if he had walked straight out of the forest itself, silent and sudden. Still, not wanting to be rude, they shifted to make space. One of them mumbled, "Yeah, sure." The stranger lowered himself onto a log, close enough to the flames that the firelight danced across his face. His eyes caught the glow, but they didn't seem to reflect it the way normal eyes do. Instead, they seemed darker, swallowing the light. He asked them to continue their stories. Said he loved hearing tales around the fire. The friends hesitated, but didn't want to break the mood. They carried on, telling tales of ghosts and strange encounters, their laughter now a little forced, a little thinner. When it was his turn, the stranger leaned forward. His smile widened, stretching too far, as if his skin struggled to contain it. "I know a story," he said. "A real one, about people who sit by the fire, just like this. People who invite someone in without knowing who he is." The friends exchanged nervous glances. The air seemed to grow heavier. The fire crackled less. The night sounds faded. "In the story," the man continued, his voice dropping almost to a whisper, "they think they're safe. They laugh, they drink, they pretend the dark doesn't matter. But the dark always matters. Because sometimes, when you stare long enough into the fire, something stares back." The group fell silent. One of them forced a laugh, trying to break the tension, but the sound died quickly. The stranger's smile never faltered. The firelight flickered, dimming for a moment as though a gust of wind had passed. Though the air was perfectly still, when the flames grew again, the man was gone. The log beside them was empty. The friends jumped to their feet, their laughter gone now, replaced by frantic whispers. They shined their phone flashlights into the trees, calling out, trying to convince themselves he was just a drifter, someone passing through. But the forest gave nothing back. No footsteps, no response, no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. Uneasy, they eventually settled back down, convincing themselves he must have slipped away while they weren't looking. They tried to shake it off, forcing conversation, but every story after that felt hollow. The woods seemed closer now, pressing against them. Every shadow looked like it could move. When they finally decided to put out the fire and crawl into their tents, the night swallowed them whole. The forest was pitch black beyond the thin nylon walls, every sound amplified. A branch cracked. Leaves rustled. Someone whispered nervously to the other, but no one wanted to get up and check. And then they heard it. A low, rasping voice. The same voice that had asked to join them by the fire. Only this time, it wasn't outside. It wasn't in the clearing. It was inside the tent. "I told you," the voice said, soft and close. "The dark always matters." One of the friends fumbled with a flashlight, switching it on in panic. The beam cut through the tent. Empty. Nothing there. Just sleeping bags and wide, terrified eyes staring back at each other. But the voice came again, this time from the corner of the tent they hadn't checked, impossibly close, as if someone crouched right behind them. The fire outside, though extinguished, suddenly flared back to life with a hiss, its glow seeping through the thin fabric of the tent walls. Shadows stretched and warped across the fabric, one shape taller, darker, looming over the others. None of them slept that night. When morning came, the fire pit was cold, the ashes undisturbed. No footprints, no sign of a stranger. But every one of them swore they had heard the voice, swore they had seen the shadow, and none of them ever returned to those woods again. Nights in the suburbs carry a different kind of weight. Not silence, exactly, but a hum. Sprinklers ticking away on automatic timers, the faint hum of power lines, the occasional bark of a restless dog. For most people, that background noise is reassuring. It means the world is running as it should. For Rachel, though, that night, it all felt too quiet. She had just moved into her new apartment, a small place on the edge of town. Boxes were still stacked in corners, half unpacked, dishes waiting on the counter. It was late, almost 1 a.m., but the heat of the summer day hadn't let go. She left her bedroom window cracked to let air in, praying for even the weakest breeze. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when it rang. Not the phone in her hand, the landline. That was odd. She hadn't even memorized the number yet. The only people who knew it were her parents, and they'd text if they needed her. The landline rang again, louder in the small apartment. Cautiously, she answered. "Hello." At first there was only static, soft but sharp, like someone dragging their breath across the receiver. Then a voice. A whisper. "I'm here." Rachel froze. The voice was faint, distorted, but there was something disturbingly familiar about it. She swallowed, forcing herself to sound firm. "Who is this?" The line clicked, and the call ended. She sat there, staring at the receiver, her chest tightening. Maybe it was a prank. Wrong number. Some kid messing around. She tried to laugh it off, but the unease clung to her like humidity. She went back to her phone. Minutes passed. Then the landline rang again. This time, she almost didn't answer, but some mix of fear and anger pushed her to pick up. "Hello?" The same static. The same voice. This time it said, "You left the window open." Rachel's heart skipped. She turned slowly toward the cracked bedroom window. The blinds swayed gently, as if touched by a hand. She dropped the receiver, pulse racing, and rushed to slam it shut. She pulled the blinds down and backed away, forcing a shaky laugh. "Probably just a coincidence," she muttered to herself. "They guessed." But she didn't believe it. Trying to calm down, she turned off the lights, locked the front door, and got ready for bed. She tucked herself under the sheets, phone on the nightstand, telling herself she was safe. Then her cell phone lit up. An incoming call. No number displayed. Just unknown. She hesitated, then answered with a shaking hand. The same static. The same voice. "Look behind you." Her body went rigid. Slowly, she turned her head toward the darkened corner of the room. The shadows seemed to bend, darker than they should be. She fumbled for the lamp, switching it on with a click. Empty. Just the corner, piled with unpacked boxes. Her cell phone dropped from her hand, the call still active on the floor. The voice whispered again, louder this time, coming both from the phone speaker and the air around her. "I'm inside the house." Rachel screamed, grabbed her keys, and bolted. She didn't stop to lock the door, didn't even look back. She ran barefoot into the night, across the parking lot, until she reached the lit street corner where traffic still passed. She called the police from her cell, voice trembling, explaining someone was inside her apartment. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers went inside, checked every corner, every closet, every box. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. One of them told her, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" She shook her head furiously. She knew what she had heard. The voice. The calls. The officers left after telling her to keep her doors locked and report if it happened again. She sat in her car the rest of the night, refusing to step back inside. The next morning, when she finally returned, sunlight streaming through the blinds, everything looked normal. Almost. The landline phone sat on the counter. Its small digital screen blinked with missed call notifications. 15, 20. All logged between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. She scrolled through the caller ID, expecting blocked or unknown numbers. But every entry was the same. Her own number. The calls had all come from inside her apartment. Ending the video. And that was the third story. 3 different nights. 3 ordinary summer evenings that turned into something unforgettable and terrifying. Sometimes, the things we fear the most aren't hiding in abandoned buildings or deep forests. Sometimes they're closer. Too close. Next time you're walking home alone, sitting by a fire, or answering a phone late at night, remember these stories, because you'll never know if the silence around you is really empty, or if something is waiting just outside the edge of the light.